So, hi, my name is Tony Armour, and welcome to the Dallas Film Podcast.
My name is Andrew Vella. I'm the project specialist for the Film Commission and happy producer of this podcast.
And we are excited to have Barak Epstein with us today.
How you guys doing?
Of the Texas Theater.
Yeah.
What's your official title of the Texas Theater?
I don't know. Guy who cleans the toilet.
So we have the guy who cleans the toilets at the Texas Theater here with us today. Well, Barak, thank you for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess to start out, tell us a little bit about the Texas Theater. Andrew and I are obviously familiar, but it's a great historical venue in Dallas. It really does a lot of amazing programming.
Long short history is the building was built in 1931, and it was at a time when most of the theaters in Dallas, the big theaters, were downtown, like on Theater Row, and the big ones were in the 20s. So in the early 30s, they started building them in the suburbs, and Oak Cliff was really considered like a suburb of its own city for a minute. And Jefferson Boulevard was like the main drag. Jefferson Boulevard basically was like North Park Mall in the 30s and 40s. It was where all the big shops were, and then they started building big retail facilities and then movie theaters. There were 3 movie theaters, and the Texas Theater was the biggest one. Now, of course, it was built during the Depression. So during its construction, Howard Hughes actually bought the chain of theaters that it was. It was the Robin Rowley chain of movie theaters. It was like a Texas chain. So it could be said that maybe Howard Hughes' money helped get the theater built and finished. And he was there in the early days. We're not certain. We don't have pictures, but he was involved to a certain extent in the early 30s. He only owned the theater chain for like 18 months, and then he sold it back. And then it was a 2,000 seat big facility. It was one of the first in Dallas with air conditioning. It might have been the first with air conditioning. Some of the air conditioning units, that part of the infrastructure of it is still in place today, from the duct heaters and the duct flow. It's massive internal machinery. And theater went on, did normal movie theater things for years and years and years, and then later became famous on November 22nd, 1963, as the place where Lee Harvey Oswald was apprehended after leaving the grassy knoll. So that changed the trajectory of Jefferson and Oak Cliff, and obviously Dallas forever. But it also changed the way the theater was viewed. About a year after the theater, the Oswald capture, the theater did a major restoration, and they covered all of the early 30s era sort of Spanish atmospheric design with a stucco redesign. That's what you see there mostly now, is this white stucco. And later on in the 90s, the theater closed. It basically was ran by the same company, if you want to call it that, because minus ownership changes, from 31 to 1989.
Wow.
Because it went from Robin Rowley, Rowley and United, which became United Artists, and United Artists actually used it as a regional headquarters in the 80s, at all the upstairs area. 89, they closed it. And then in the 90s, it was in various owners and operators who had it for short periods of time and then closed it. There was a fire in 95, which set it back. And then a group got together in 2001 called the Oak Cliff Foundation, and with the help of the Oak Cliff Chamber, the Oak Cliff Foundation, and the city of Dallas, they were able to figure out a plan to get the theater going again after it had been basically potentially could be bulldozed. And a lot of that was based on the street, had gone into a certain area of disrepair, and they wanted the theater to sort of improve the whole neighborhood. So they did a lot of work for 10 years, and then my group got involved in 2010 to operate the theater and just to get anything happening there, essentially. And we started showing movies, and we started doing events, and then we just kind of kept upgrading it and changing it over the years. In 2021, during pandemic, really into 2020, since we were closed, essentially, we figured out a plan to do a renovation to use the unused balcony and turn it into a second screening room. While adding space to the main theater, we added a row of seating to the main theater, so the first theater's bigger, and it has a balcony area, a historical, accurate balcony area. And then we built another bar upstairs. We added all sorts of extra ADA access. So it was a big project that technically we wouldn't have been able to do without COVID. And now we can do all sorts of events. We can still do movies, but now we can do live events. We can do more comedy, more concerts. We can do more movie premieres, and more first-run movies. We can run those more upstairs while we have big events downstairs. So it really, opened us up as a multi-use facility once we were able to add that second space. And that's where we're at right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
well, I know we
yeah.
love doing our workshops
sure.
and events
Yeah.
there, and so you guys have been a great partner for working with us. We're excited to keep those going in the future as well.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been able to do those without the renovation, because it gives us that slightly smaller space, which is a little more intimate, that you guys like to use.
Yeah.
And then if we have a big event, we can flexible and move it downstairs. So so thank you guys for booking those events with us.
No,
No,
it's been
always fun.
great. Yeah, we
Yeah.
love it.
So what I love about your theater is that when you walk in, you can feel like the historical significance of it. Like
Yeah.
you just feel like it's like a time capsule piece, and it's such a great spot to be in. Can you talk a little bit about the films you program, because you're still programming some of the films that were first shown when the theater was open, but you do things a little.
You mean like in 2010?
Yeah, and then some, like you
Yeah.
accompany them with like a live score and things
Oh,
like
sure.
that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your programming? And what
Yeah,
that
I
looks like?
mean, so the mix of the programming is either stuff that's coming to us via touring programs, or events like you guys hosting a program, or it's stuff that we're putting together, and it's heavily repertory focused, right? So classic repertory, but also niche repertory, horror stuff, sci-fi stuff, Western stuff, restorations whenever we can. We do a lot of the Janus Criterion Collection restorations, almost all of them, and a lot of the programs we put together are sometimes based on those. Some of those restorations, but also the studio restorations. Like for instance, this Halloween we're going to do, or this Halloween season we're doing Claudio Simonetti's Goblin, the guy who did all the scores for Argento movies, with a live score to Demons. We've got Carl Dreyer's Vampire with a live score by the Mercury Rev. So that's a big thing we do. There's this band called the Invincible Czars from Austin, and they do a touring program every year and bring in live scores. We've also had a ballet program that comes, and we do like a pre-show ballet sometimes to classic movies. We're doing Nightmare Before Christmas this year, but we've done like Suspiria and Black Swan and Red Shoes and La Jetée, movies like that. So we love doing event cinema, meaning like it's movie and what is the other thing. It's not just like we don't just press the play and walk away. It's usually a 35mm print with an intro, a filmmaker there, a band, a ballet, activation, a book talk. Maybe Roger Deakins shows up.
You're welcome.
So those are the kind of things we love to do. And yeah, I mean, having Deakins there with Assassination of Jesse James and Blade Runner was insane, and having him there, people from all over the community getting to talk to him about the films that they love of him and the shots that they loved, and him being so humble and talking about his work was a great experience for I think all the film production community in Dallas.
Yeah, it was crazy to have 900 people essentially at the theater, and then every single person that got in line for Q&A, they just answered every question.
Oh, totally.
2 hours of
Long
just
Q&A.
nonstop Q&A.
So speaking of that Q&A, if you go back to one of our early podcast episodes, you can watch the or you can watch and listen to the Q&A on our podcast. So
great.
So if you missed Roger Deakins, you can go back and see the whole thing.
You can relive it with us.
Yeah, no, that was amazing program.
And so speaking about the second room you opened up at the theater, can you talk a little bit about the difference of experience that an audience member will get? Because you do something different with the audio, correct?
Well, there's a few things that are different. I mean, people are like, oh, I want to be in the big room. The big room's downstairs. It's a bigger room. It's a boomier room. The screen size actually in both rooms is pretty similar. And a lot of people have been calling the upstairs theater the mini IMAX. because you're kind of close to the screen. It's kind of the limitations of the architecture, so we had to make it work. But we were like, we talked about this early on. We're like, well, maybe we should just make the screen a little smaller to compensate. We're like, no, let's just make the screen as big as we can get it to fit the room. So it's a big. It's like 36 feet wide. Downstairs is actually 38 feet wide. It's only 2 feet bigger.
Really?
Yeah, but it feels bigger because
yeah.
you're in a bigger room. I get it.
Yeah.
So anyways, there's minor differences like that. Upstairs is also the only room where we're doing 35mm. That was the one concession we had to make in the renovation because, obviously we built a wall, so the upstairs booth that was original can only go to the one wall. Can't shoot through the wall. So so the main room, the big room is a 4K RGB laser, top of the line Christie. So we think that looks great, but we can't do film downstairs anymore.
Yeah.
So anyway, so upstairs we can do 35. We can also still do 4K DCP. Also the sound system, and there's actually 7.1. So we can get 2 more channels of audio in there. Versus the downstairs is the big 5.1.
Yeah.
So those are some of the differences you'll hear.
Yeah.
I like the upstairs because I like that you're right. It's like this cyc wall right here. Like you're right up against,
You're in it.
the giant screen right there, and it gives you that I guess mini IMAX is a good way to describe that.
A few people have said that, so
My-
I'll go with it.
Yeah, my only regret about the Deacons thing is I didn't sit and watch Jesse James with
Did not
everyone
sit?
else.
Why not?
I know. I should
We went to dinner with Roger Deakins. I mean,
Right.
Yeah. So you mentioned 35 millimeter print upstairs, and so what I noticed about your theater is that you don't show like you won't show like Avengers Endgame or something like that.
We
But you
did
will,
show the first 2 Avengers movies, by the way.
Yeah, but when
In
but I
2012
noticed
and
that,
2013, 2014.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
When I noticed that you were the only screen in Texas, if I'm correct, that showed Doctor Strange in 35 millimeter.
Yeah,
correct?
I
that's
think
cool.
maybe one of the Alamos in Austin had it. But basically, that was an interesting story because I don't know if you want to get in the weeds on this, but it's sort of a national story. But so Disney several years ago decided that theaters that run their first run movies couldn't run their repertory movies, and theaters that run their repertory movies couldn't run their first run movies.
really.
Arbitrary decision, whatever. There's press about it, but so theaters could choose. You could say, I want to
Right.
be a theater that shows Avenger and Star Wars, or I want to be a theater that shows Princess Bride. Princess Bride's Fox, which is also part of Disney.
Yeah.
So the Disney repertory catalog is massive because of that.
To me, that's a simple choice. From if I'm programming, which
Totally.
I'm not.
So we went repertory because that's what we
Yeah.
go with. But anyway, years ago they didn't care as much, and we were able to run the new Star Wars and new Avengers movies.
Yeah.
But when they changed that rule, we decided to go repertory, so we couldn't run those anymore.
Yeah.
But they made an exception for Doctor Strange because Sam Raimi said, "Hey, I want to make a few prints for my movie. What theaters can run them on 35 millimeter?"
Okay.
And Disney, in collaboration with Sam Raimi, and from what I understand, the good folks at Grindhouse Releasing, people that we book a lot of the Tuesday Night Trash program from, they own the rights to the original Evil Dead, and they're friendly with Raimi. And they said, well, you got to call the Tex Theater, So we were in there. So it was like us, one couple Alamos, obviously the New Bev in LA, I think maybe the Coolidge in Boston.
Wow.
Those are the kind of theaters that they picked to run
Yeah.
that on 35. So we were definitely the only one in DFW running it on 35 and running it on film at all.
That's cool.
Which is
Yeah.
different than we ran. We ran Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Which we ran on 35, but Oppenheimer is also available in 70 IMAX,
Yeah.
and there was lots more prints.
Yeah.
He's more of an advocate for lots of people to see his
Yeah.
movies on
Absolutely.
film, which is
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah, and so the Texas theater is in a Hispanic population of DFW, and so how have you seen your programming or the theater bring in some of that audience into your theater, and how do you sometimes select a film to show based on that audience, or you just hope for the best?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we do show a lot of Spanish language programming. We try to do the restorations when they come about, but then we also have an in-house series that Bianca Vega programs called Cinema con Nosotros. We also do lots of programming with the Oak Cliff Cultural Center next door, which is often Spanish language cinema. Whenever we show a Guillermo del Toro movie, that's always a big deal. And we've sold out screenings of Pan Labyrinth before, not even event screenings, just screenings of the film because people love it. So I feel like the younger movie buff, Latino audience is interested in all this stuff.
Yeah.
We did a program recently called Trash Mex, which was these guys from LA. They came down and they showed the kind of how Robert Rodriguez, what was his first movie, El Mariachi?
Yeah.
So that El Mariachi is part of a whole genre of these sort of backyard Mexico action movies, right?
Yeah, okay.
And that's what he was trying to do. He wasn't trying to make a movie that was going to be a Columbia Pictures release.
Yeah.
But anyway, that genre of movies, that exists, and people, you can just used to be able to buy them in gas stations. And these guys in LA, called these Trash Mex guys, they've gathered them, and they're sort of recontextualizing them and showing them in theaters. Cool. And we just did a program with them, and we're hoping to do more with them. So I mean, anytime something comes about, we're all about it. And and there's a new restoration of a Criterion Channel film from Mexico City called Victims of Sin. Early 50s, kind of like gangster noir Mexico movie. We're going to show that in November. It's 4K restoration. It's really good. So we're always on the lookout for that, and to engage the community in that way. I mean, we do Selena every year for Selena Day, Selena 214, which is a whole neighborhood event, which happens at the Cultural Center, Top 10 Records, Texas Theater, sometimes Deep Ellum. So yeah, we're all about it.
I love that. And so you mentioned this earlier. Can you talk about Tuesday Night Trash? Because I keep trying to get Tony to go, and I told him this is like the place where you need to live. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Tuesday Night Trash.
Well, so Tuesday Night Trash is a program we've had really since day one, since 2010, and it's on Tuesdays, and usually it's free. And these are movies that are, unsung trash movies. Some of them are good movies sometimes. Some of them are not good movies.
Yeah.
That can be just as fun.
Yeah, and but they're fun. They're always kind of fun in a way. And Travis Box and Ben Jasson have been programming that for years. And we have a loyal audience that comes to those once a month on first Tuesday of the month. Yeah, you should come.
Well,
sometimes they're local films. Honestly, we have a couple indigenous old school Dallas filmmakers from the 70s and 80s.
Oh wow!
That we've shown their films, and we're
cool.
working on another one, bringing some of those guys back.
Love
that.
Yeah, Tuesday nights. All right.
Yeah.
The problem is, I'm so exhausted by the time I get done working all day. I'm like, I don't want to leave the house.
9:15. It's a good slot. You can go do something.
All right.
Dinner.
Gonna have to do Tuesday Night
Get
Trash.
a drink.
That's right.
Tuesday Night Trash. That's where you need
You've
to
been
go.
right.
I've been to a Tuesday Night Trash. I haven't been.
What'd
to
you
many,
see?
But it was like when I first moved to Dallas, like 5 years ago. I don't remember what it was, but I mean, they're fun. Like that's what I love about your theaters. Like you have a loyal audience.
Yeah.
And then the person working at concessions could be the person that programmed the movie of the night, which is so cool about like the culture you guys have built around the Texas theater.
Yeah, it's definitely unique, and it is a fun, super indie vibe, which is really cool, which I think people enjoy. It gives you that sensibility, like if you're in LA, there's so many different little theaters all over the place that can just program and play little things. It's almost like that unique taste of different and outside the box that you're not going to find anywhere else a lot of times.
Yeah.
And you got to think, segue to Oak Cliff Film Festival, that the Oak Cliff Film Festival has a lot of that same sensibility that you guys use when you program, the theater itself as well.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about that. The film festival came about because, in the very early days of the theater, we were not just repertory. We were like, we're going to do repertory and we're going to do like film festival style programming, meaning we're going to find films on the circuit that are not playing theatrically in Dallas, and we're going to play them on a Tuesday night at 5, or whatever, a weeknight screening of a festival movie that no one knows about. We quickly realized that didn't work at all, and it was hard to get interest in an Andrew Bujalski movie on a Wednesday randomly, or whatever it might be. So me, Jason Reimer and Eric Steele, we were part of the early team, and we figured out that like let's actually build this into its own event, which we called the Oak Cliff Film Festival, and we made a separate organization. We made its own nonprofit. We have a separate board, and it happens every June, and it can have educational programming throughout the year, and we can scour the other festivals and do a call for entries and find films. And put it together and actually like build interest in these films, and we have that particular whatever if it's a Bujalski film, whatever, we can get 200 people to come to that during the festival. So now it's been going strong. We're in like our 12th or 13th year. Ashton Campbell's been heading the production behind that and leading the charge on that. So we should be announcing 2024 dates pretty soon, but it'll be in June like we've been doing every year. So we're excited for that.
Yeah. And when do submissions open for the festival?
They're going to open in mid-November. For 2024. Yeah, okay. So we'll have dates and we'll have call for entries up in November.
Love that.
Yeah.
So perfect timing for this episode then.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Awesome. The episode will come out right before the announcement of your call for entries.
Yeah.
And so Tony's gonna be annoyed because I always talk about this around everybody we were with. But like, so how did the Criterion Channel feature on the Texas Theater come about?
What was the Criterion Channel's channel before Criterion Channel? It's called Filmstruck.
Filmstruck, yeah.
So when they had that partnership, when they built Filmstruck, which was a big deal with them because they also had TCM involved, and I think Warner's was involved for a minute. Anyway, there was some budget behind it, and they were building programming for it, and we were doing promotions to promote Filmstruck on our pre-show or whatever. And they had a big presence at the Art House Convergence, which was used to be a convention trade show meetup that would happen at Sundance every year for art house theaters and film festival programmers to go to. And I was active in that group, and I would go to that and talk to those people and present at panels and whatnot. And the people who were involved with Criterion and Janus and Filmstruck at the time, they were building this thing called Art House America, which they were going to go around and make these 10 to 15 minute short films about theaters and present them on the channel. So they had already made a few, but we had talked to them at Convergence, and they said they wanted to make one on us. So that's kind of how it happened. Yeah.
So how did that feel for you? Because you obviously program a lot of Criterion and Janus films, and so like to have them there and now just doing a feature on your theater, which is also, you guys shoot movies in your theater too. So that must have been like a crazy cool experience.
It was great. I mean, they brought a filmmaker down to document what was happening over the course of a week, and I think we had the La Jetée Ballet that week. And we had a Tuesday Night Trash, and maybe the Oscars were happening, and there was lots of other stuff happening in the neighborhood that week, and lots of other programming. And they interviewed everyone who worked there and behind the scenes, and it's a cool film, and I think it's still on the Criterion site.
Still there.
That's cool.
And there's several of them now, and there's one in a lot of the big cities, and a lot of the theaters that are sort of similar to what we do, I think, are featured in that Art House America series. But no, we love it, and it's great, and especially if people haven't been, or if I see somebody from out of state and they're like, oh, I've seen that, and I want to come to the Texas Theater, I want to come to Dallas, or if I go to Dallas, that's where I'm going, because I saw it on Criterion, for sure.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
How do you find the time for everything? Because I know you obviously have your Texas Film Gear company as well, and then I know Ashton obviously primarily with Oak Cliff Film Festival and the theater itself is like. Do you ever sleep, or you just start working at 7 a.m. and stop at 11 p.m. every night?
To be honest, our core group, which is it's me and Ashton and Jason, and really a lot of people behind the scenes. I mean, you gotta have lots of things that you do. Even everyone who works at the theater, a lot of them are artists or programmers or they do other things, and we encourage that. Maybe you don't sleep so much because you want to work or you're passionate about what you do.
I'm right there with you. I get
What's
it.
this guy?
And so obviously you guys do program, horror and different things at the festival, but more than what you guys program there, did you grow up a horror fan? Did you?
I have to say I was not a horror guy until college, actually.
Yeah.
When I was like a kid, I was afraid of the Fangoria stuff.
Yeah.
I was afraid of Freddy and all those kinds of movies. Those weren't for me. And it was during college when I was obsessed with Sam Raimi movies and whatnot. And you see Evil Dead 2 was like a game changer, and you're like, are there movies like this?
Yeah.
And then you find all the movies that are like Evil Dead 2, and then all of a sudden you're a horror fan.
That was the thing. I was never a horror fan either, but then in high school I had a friend who every Friday night he would go to the video store, because this was the 80s, and get a stack of films, and it was primarily all horror films and some trashy action films in there, and we'd pour through them over the weekend. And then there's that period in the early 90s where every time we would meet someone new that would you bring into the film group, the friend group, the first thing you had to make them do was watch Evil Dead 2 if they hadn't seen it. And so saw that film hundreds of times as like, oh, you haven't seen Evil Dead 2? All right, come on over.
Gateway drug, really.
And so that was the end. Yeah, exactly, the gateway drug to bring people in.
Yeah.
And so you guys obviously have programmed Evil Dead in the past, correct?
And we had Bruce Campbell at the Texas Theater.
Oh yeah, so
just 6 months ago.
Talk about that and like
he did his traveling show, which is it's a whole day with Bruce Campbell. He does like a game show.
Yeah, it's literally a game show.
It's like a nerd game show.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because he knows his audience, and and then we show a movie. So we showed Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness with him there.
Yeah.
And he tells a big story about each film. and then we do this big game show. Hopefully he'll come back and do it again. It was amazing.
We'll get him
He was there for like 14 hours. It was a long day. So his autographs. But no, that was obviously we've run those films, all three of them before, and obviously we still run the new Raimis when possible. But it's not just the Raimi stuff. I mean, we show serious horror. We've shown Exorcist, but we've also Reanimator, all sorts of classic horror. Obviously, we talked about Vampire, Nosferatu, those kinds of films. Other James Whale films. Lots of times, James Whale films get talked about in part of our Cinewild LGBT program. The whole gamut from the turn of the century. To Hitchcock. Right now we're doing also a big Giallo series program by Jason Reimer, which is Mario Bava, Dario Argento, and then also some stuff by De Palma and Hitchcock. So we try to get into all these different kinds of horror.
Yeah.
Tuesday Night Trash also obviously digs into horror and trashy horror and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Circling back, I want to go back to Bruce Campbell for a second. Did you ever watch his TV series from the early '90s, Briscoe County Jr.?
Oh yeah.
So
hold on. There was a clip so there's a clip show that they ran as part of that.
Yeah.
And it's got all the clips of all his movies and all his shows. The grainiest piece of content in that 20-minute clip show was like a 10-second part of Briscoe County. There's no good copies of that apparently.
Yeah.
Really?
If you know where they are, Bruce probably wants them. It was like it stuck out how bad. I was like, what is that? Oh, it's Briscoe County. Like you couldn't barely even see it.
I'm trying to
It
remember.
was like a dub of a dub of a dub of a dub.
Because to be honest with you, back in the day, I think I watched Briscoe County Jr. off of a Netflix DVD rental. You could rent the entire series on Netflix DVD.
This guy's a Netflix DVD guy.
If that exists still, if those DVDs exist somewhere, so they're probably better quality than the version that
Yeah,
I
I bet they
recently.
do. I mean, I'm sure they're SD. They're probably not even
I'm
HD.
sure, but they're SD off of a dub of a dub of a dub.
Right, but I don't remember the quality being that bad. But I'm
Maybe they're
pretty
good. It's
sure.
probably shot on 16 at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
No.
I mean, there's probably some 16 masters somewhere,
Yeah.
or at least negative.
Buried in a vault
Yeah.
somewhere is Briscoe County Jr.
Yeah.
But I rewatched it years ago, and it was great. I absolutely loved
Yeah.
it, and I would love to re-find it again now that I've been reminded in this conversation.
Well, do you know if that was Bruce's first time in Dallas?
No, he had done a similar event a couple years ago. We didn't get it. It was at a different venue. And obviously he's done Comic-Cons and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, years ago I saw him at Comic-Cons, and he's a Comic-Con guy.
Yeah.
He's done books.
sure.
I mean, I was at a book signing at Barnes & Noble 20 years ago, and different comics. So he's
Yeah.
come to Dallas plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What was his impression?
Dallas
of,
is a big Comic-Con nerd market.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's always been.
There's a fan expo
There's
every
a fan
June.
expo every 2 weeks
There's
now.
a fan expo in Irving, which
Yeah.
happens in October.
Yeah.
So there's those two. And
There's
then-
Texas Frightmare Weekend.
Yeah.
There's Mark Walters Comic-Con. There's stuff happening all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And we love it because a lot of those people, they're looking, the actors, people in town
Yeah.
are looking for other things to do
Yeah.
at night. And often we're hosting events for them.
Yeah.
So we love to partner with those kind of groups. And
That's
that's how we
perfect.
did our big Scream event a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Texas Frightmare Weekend. We had Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich in town.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, I
nice.
remember
And
that.
that was the first time we did both theaters sold out before we did.
Wow.
It's only happened twice
Really?
with the same movie. Like
Scream and
Scream
Drive
and Blade Runner 2049.
So that's like a challenge now. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, what else can we do? What else could we do to sell it out? I
Yeah.
have some ideas. I have an idea of someone we've already spoken to
Oh,
that would
yeah.
that would sell it out.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's our goal. We got 850 both rooms.
Yeah. Okay. We set such a high bar. So now it's
I got one. We can't say it yet,
All right.
but I know who it is.
coming soon.
Yeah.
Coming soon.
Yeah. Actually, Napoleon Dynamite sold out both.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
Who did you have in town for that
all
one?
the big three.
Yeah.
They were there. It was John Heater and the other John and Pedro.
Amazing.
Yeah, we're gonna have on our podcast.
plug,
We're recording next week. Chris Doc Wyatt, everyone calls him Doc Wyatt, one of the producers from Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
he's great. Yeah, and he does a ton of animation stuff now, like animated TV series that he executive produces and runs and everything. So, anyways,
So those
that's
listening, keep a lookout for the producer from Napoleon Dynamite to be on this podcast. So
yeah,
keep a
Doc,
lookout.
yeah, Doc's
Awesome.
great. Looking
Yeah.
forward to recording that one. So, Brock, tell us a little bit about JFK Day, 60th anniversary coming up. Are you doing anything particular with the Texas Theater?
Right. So, every year we like to, pay a tribute commemoration to what happened on 11/22/63, right? So we show usually just the movies that were playing that day. There's a movie called War is Hell and a movie called Cry of Battle. War is Hell is actually a lost film, meaning it does not exist in its completion that we know about anywhere. And that's the movie that Oswald was sitting in.
Wow.
We have the poster for it. We have a 35-ish minute version of it that we've compiled over various sources over the years.
Wow.
That we show. We've re-edited it. It's a version that has it's partially silent from like a Castle home movie version.
Wow.
And then there was a rediscovered one reel of a 16mm print overseas that we were able to get a scan of. And then there's a random intro from Audie Murphy where he talks about being in war. And so we put all those things together and we have a version that we show. And then we also show Cry of Battle, which probably never showed that day if you think about it, because Oswald was captured during War is Hell and then all hell broke loose.
Right.
And so I'm sure they never
It was scheduled to play.
It was scheduled to play. So War is Hell was 1:20, Cry of Battle was at 2:45. The marquee says Cry of Battle, Van Heflin, War is Hell. Van Heflin, people think he was in War is Hell. He was in Cry of Battle. He was like sort of a star. War is Hell is like a tiny B movie.
Yeah.
People are like, how come you can't see it? Because it was, I think it was the B movie to a B movie already. It was like a second movie. And, if you watch it, it's like just like four guys in army hats like wandering around the desert. Like it's super DIY. And this guy named Bert Topper was the filmmaker. He was the star. He was the writer. I think like this sort of thing. He was like his own little mini Roger Corman in the early 60s, and he made these movies.
Wow.
Most of them are gone.
Yeah.
Because they have no significance until apparently somebody later was like, hey, War is Hell was a movie that was playing when Oswald was captured. Where is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. We got this 3-minute version. Anyway, so there's lots of chatter on the internet about why it doesn't exist and where could it be. But anyway, we show those versions, and then sometimes we'll show Oliver Stone's JFK.
Yeah.
And Oliver Stone's JFK is a lot of movies get shot at the theater, or parts from scenes from movies get shot at Texas Theater. Stone's JFK is the only movie where the Texas Theater plays itself.
Oh,
wow.
So they shot on Jefferson Boulevard in 1990. They don't have to do that much. The bones from 63 and 90, even today, they're not that different.
Right.
So they just had to do some set dressing in cars, and they had to redo the front box office. The box office that exists currently, the one that sticks out a little bit at the theater, that was put there for the movie, basically.
And they just left it.
And it's just still there.
Of course,
It's
why
been
would
there.
you take it down?
Because the original one from the 60s was different. So for the 50th, it was big deal in the city of Dallas, right, to do a proper commemoration. But then during the off years, there's not as much interest.
Yeah.
We might do it on a day and no one cares. 12 people will come. No one cares on the 54th anniversary. But we think this year is going to be again renewed interest. It's the 60th. It's an anniversary year. So we're going to do that program. We're going to show Oliver Stone's JFK, which, by the way, is really a masterclass of technical filmmaking. If you haven't watched it in a while, cinematography.
I've seen it, but not in a while. Yeah.
I mean, Robert Richardson's first Oscar for cinematography. I mean, technically, how it's put together. If you have seen Oppenheimer this year, you should go back and rewatch JFK for the way that those movies are put together. I guarantee you, no one watched it like on repeat.
Yeah.
In the structure of that movie, and Oliver Stone had it. He was Nolan in his era.
Yeah.
So it's really a masterwork film. We have the 4K restoration, and there's a new restoration of a documentary called Rush to Judgment, which was previously only available on 16mm. We showed it on loan from MoMA a few years ago. A hard to get version, but now there's a new restoration of it that some of the Janus Films people are involved with. And we're going to show that. It's a documentary kind of in the aftermath. It was made a few years, 64, 65, I think, maybe 67.
Oh, wow.
And then our big program is something that we did do 10 years ago. We did a live reenactment play of the people who were at the theater that day who were interviewed in the Warren Report.
Oh, really? Wow.
Okay. So the Warren Report
That's crazy.
is a 1,300-page David Mamet play. If you pick it up, that's the way it's written. It's like interrogation and talking.
Yeah.
Like, were you there that day? Yeah, I was there that day. What'd you do that day? I picked up the thing. Was it that day? Like, that's the staccato dialogue that's written in this manuscript. So we have Eric Steele recontextualize it as a live play, and we have a one-act play version of it.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to do that on stage. The people who were there that day, which was Julia Postel, who was the girl who worked at the box office, a guy named Butch Burroughs, who worked at the candy counter that day, Johnny Brewer, who was the guy who worked at the shoe store, who saw Oswald at the shoe store and then followed him to the Texas Theater, and then the investigator, who's interrogating them.
Yeah.
And that's the play you'll see if you come to
That's
see
cool.
Wow.
JFK Day at the Texas Theater this year on 11/22, day before Thanksgiving.
Good way to kick off your Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Good way,
right.
but people are in from out of town. Maybe this is a
That's
good
a
thing.
great.
Yeah.
I would imagine. I would think you might get people literally traveling in from out of town specifically for the 60th.
You will. This year
Yeah.
you'll have some. I mean, the 50th was a big deal. We had press on the street at 5 a.m.
Wow.
Wow.
Knocking on the door. There were towers everywhere. Live broadcast trucks
Yeah.
everywhere. This year is not going to be. It's crazy. I think I don't even think that there's official things happening on the grassy knoll this year like there were for the 50th. Obviously, the museum will be open and everything. But it's not as I don't think the city is recognizing it this year in the same way that they did 10 years ago.
Sure. I guess that makes sense.
So yeah.
And to me, it's coming to Dallas. The first time I ever came to Dallas, back maybe 2009 or something like that, I came because a buddy wanted to go to a Cowboys game. But of course, the first thing we had to do was we got to go to the grassy knoll. It's a really strange thing that Dallas is super famous for the Dallas Cowboys. And for a president getting murdered, basically, are like two. There are more things than that in Dallas. Yes, much more. But to the outside world, that's what people think of. That's it's a strange thing for a city to to embrace that history behind it as a tourism.
And Tony, from not being from Dallas, that's the second thing you think of behind the Cowboys. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, and before I took the job, which I started in January, I asked people, I was like, what's the second thing you think of when you think of Dallas? Because I think everybody, Dallas Cowboys, because the two words just kind of go together. And so a lot of people would say, oil, Kennedy, that kind of thing. J.R. Ewing, So it's really interesting, just the zeitgeist of what Dallas is.
And so do you ever have tourists that just want to see the theater for the purpose of that?
Oh yeah, I mean every day, because if you go to the grassy knoll, they have buses that will take you to the Texas Theater.
Oh yeah.
So they have these JFK tour buses or whatever.
Yeah.
Most of them just stop outside and there's a tour guide and he points at things, but we do allow official tours if they're scheduled and everything like that. But we're not. We're not a JFK museum. We have to be a functioning, space for all the other things that we do. But on 11/22 every year, we can be a JFK museum.
Of course.
So we can kind of own the history of that day.
Sure, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Love
that.
Yeah, that's cool. That programming sounds really great.
Yeah. So if you're coming to Dallas or thinking of planning a trip to Dallas.
If you're in town visiting family for Thanksgiving, JFK Day.
at the
after you stop by the grassy knoll, come by JFK
Hop
Day
on the tour bus.
for the Texas Theater.
Don't get back on. Just get off and watch a movie.
That's right.
There you
Awesome.
go.
Do that.
Well, anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I think we're good. We got a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Always look on our site. Check our socials. See what we got going on. We got stuff going on every day. Pretty much.
Well, Barak Epstein, Texas Theater. Thank you so much for joining us on the Dallas Film Podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.